Hey guys, new video for Path of Exile. So the patch 3.24 patch notes have dropped, and there have been some very big changes to Armour Stacker, so I thought we'd cover them in this video and go over what we can do to adapt to these kind of changes. Okay, so the biggest change here, there is quite a few changes. We're only going to go over two changes here, and that is going to be that the Veiled modifier that provides reduced mana cost of skills during effect can no longer be unveiled or crafted on flasks. Right, and also it also has been removed from the jewels. Right, so you can't really get it on jewels or utility flasks, and that's a pretty big change because, well, Armour Stacker was using that craft to reduce the cost of the Divine Blessing. So very big changes, and there is some things we're gonna have to do to adapt. Armour Stacker isn't really dead, you know, it's like it's still gonna work, so don't really have to worry about that. Early game hasn't really changed that much, like before you get your Mage Blood and that kind of stuff, because you're already using a flask. You had to push the button, do all this kind of stuff to get your grace going, and now you just kind of change the flask because there is the same reduced mana cost suffix on mana flasks or hybrid flasks. That's not a veiled modifier, so there's no patch note here that was removed, so it's safe to think that that's still going to be in the game. Whether or not that is a oversight or not, don't really know, but as of now, we're going to go over some examples of how you can set up your Divine Blessing. Okay, so I have three sort of examples over here we can go over. So basically, the first setup is going to be for someone who wants to use a Brutal Restraint Timeless Jewel, or like say you're you know, an early game, kind of like you don't have a Mage Blood and this kind of stuff. So how are we going to get to close to 100% reduced? Well, we have, you know, 40 from Inspiration, we have 15 from the Dreamer area, and that is this area here. There is this, you know, 5% reduced mana cost here, and then another 10% over here. So this area gives 15. And we have the Mana Mastery, 10%. Now you can get, you still can get 5% reduced on your ring suffix, so that's not going to really change. And then we have the rest from the flask. So what kind of flask are we talking about? It's this kind of flask here. You can get it either on a mana flask or a hybrid flask, like we said. There's a suffix that goes all the way up to 29%. So for this setup, you don't actually need 29%. You know, you could get a 25% flask and you'll still be fine. And then also one important thing with the flask is you do need to have this effect is not removed when unreserved mana is filled. Or there's another one that it's like recovery occurs at the very end of effect. And basically the reason you need this is because if you don't have this, the effect is going to be removed as soon as you reach full mana, which is going to be pretty much instantly. So in order to have this active, so you can actually then cast your Grace Aura, it needs to have this prefix, or the other one we mentioned. Okay, so that's pretty much very easy fix. All you do is just use one of these different flasks and you're good to go. Okay, well, what if you don't want to use a flask, right? So there is a certain ways we can do this, and it is going to require sort of endgame gear, you could say. So basically we have the same thing here, Inspiration, and then we're getting, we can get 16% or maybe a bit more, you know, depending on your build, from a Militant Faith. So this jewel is something I've been using quite a bit in a lot of my endgame builds, and basically it's a Militant Faith here with 1% reduced mana cost of skills per 10 devotion. You can also get Aura effect per 10 devotion as well, which is a very nice combo. And basically, since we have about, well, this one has 170 devotion, so that's 17% reduced, but I think a lot of builds are going to be having like 116 or 160 devotion, so I just set it to 16. So basically, the way you get all your devotion is you have your Militant Faith here, and then you have a Unnatural Instinct, and this is going to give you quite a lot more devotion. You see, without it, we only have about 95, so that's going to be 9% reduced mana cost of skills, but with this, we get quite a bit more devotion because the Unnatural Instinct picks up all of these little nodes here that are giving devotion. And then we have the Dreamer area. So you are going to have to spend extra points on the passive tree over here to get some more reduced cost. And then there is a Mana Mastery. So Mana Mastery over here, this one is set to this here, but you can see 10% reduced mana cost of skills you can get here. And then there's some rings, right? So rings can get unveiled up to about 7%. And then you can also either get it as a synth implicit for 5%, and then, or if you use one of these geodesic rings, I don't really have one to show, but it has like increased effect of prefixes, and so you can basically get 10 to 12% per ring, I believe, and then basically you don't need to use a flask. So problem with this setup is, though, you are going to be needing to use these rings, which means you are limited to unique. You can't use unique rings, right? You can't use an original sin or a Nimbus or that kind of stuff. So, but this is one sort of setup idea I had. Okay, so what can you do if you are going to want to use unique rings, like 2 of them? Like say you want to use Nimbus and original sin. Well, this is kind of the setup I'm thinking of. It's pretty much the same up to here, and then you just use a flask. And you get a nice rounded number of 100% reduced. So there's a couple of ways that, for now at least, that we can sort of enable our Grace aura. And one might think that, why go through all this trouble? Maybe it's just time to ditch the boots and then just run Grace normally. Like, I think there's already a lot of people who do this, like especially on Champion. They just completely skip the Divine Blessing and then go for a permanent Grace aura, which, isn't really that bad. You are just going to be losing damage. That's pretty much it. But at the same time, you can use a evasion pair of boots and get a lot of flat evasion that way. That might make up for the reduced levels of Grace. But overall, I think, starting out, we don't really know that much about the League, what kind of items are going to be available, what kind of items you can craft, and maybe there is some kind of cool thing we can craft with mana cost or, one of those unique jewels. There might be something that can be used. We don't really know all that much yet. So for now, this is sort of some setups that are going to work in the end game. So it is sort of a little bit sad that this thing is removed, right? I don't really like it that much either. And I think we do have to kind of talk a little bit about sort of, Armour Stacker history, you could say, maybe. I think a lot of people who started playing Armour Stacker started playing in, what I would call like the golden ages for Armour Stacker, right? Where like last league, I think was probably the strongest Armour Stacker has ever been, despite a lot of the nerfs, like the removal of the alt quality gems and this kind of stuff. And a lot of people started playing during this time, but there was a lot of Armour Stacker wasn't always this smooth to play. If we go back to the beginning with the March of Legion boots, when you could have 4 Divine Blessing auras, people were actually casting 4 auras every 18 seconds, just to get that extra power and enable the Armour Stacker. One of the biggest change, I guess, was the March of Legion boots. You can only have 1 aura. That was a big shakeup to Armour Stacker, and then after that it's been pretty smooth. There's been a couple of like slap on the wrist kind of things, and don't do this anymore, but nothing really that big. And this change now is probably one of the bigger changes since the March of Legion boots change, affecting the Divine Blessing. But overall, Armour Stacker is not really dead. Like, even if they completely removed March of Legion boots, you could still play it without even using the Divine Blessing. So no need to worry about that. I think it is going to be a little bit harder to set up, especially in endgame. Gonna have to make a lot more build choices, especially if you're gonna go for synth rings and skip out on some extra power from, say, something like an original sin or that kind of stuff. Okay, so I thought I'd mention one other interesting item that people might want to use if you're like on a budget or this kind of stuff, and there is this Honor Home helmet that has up to 20% reduced. So this helmet isn't really that bad, you could say, because it has +2 to socketed gems. So, and then you can also corrupt it, right? You can double corrupt it. So what this means is, because it's a socketed 2 gems, so you could say have an Enlighten in here and have level 6 Enlighten, right? Or level 7 Enlighten. So this helmet isn't really that bad if you think about it. It does have a little bit of energy shield, not really all that great, but does come with reduced mana cost and some increased rarity of items found. Very big, probably the strongest stat on the helmet. But anyways, yeah, so there's some other interesting items you guys can go check out. I have a link here in the Armour Stacker Compendium for unique items relating to mana cost and this kind of stuff. But I think that'll be it for this one, guys. I'll probably be playing the League, as usual, playing an Armour Stacker. I have updated the Compendium with one of my starter builds. I'll probably be doing the Smite one or the Lightning Strike one. But I'm not really sure, I'm not super hyped about the league. It does look a little bit boring, honestly, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so that's me for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.